Hey, bestie.
Welcome to Spill the Tea, Not the Wine, the podcast where we sip, spill, and say what's on our mind.
I'm Sarah, a fiery redhead chef and former Marine with a knack for stirring the pot, literally and figuratively.
And I'm Sena, here to bring the vibes, the deep dives, and a little bit of real talk.
We're besties serving up hot takes on celebrity news, pop culture, relationships, and life's crazy moments.
So grab a glass
and let's spill the tea.
In this episode, we're chatting about the surprising origins of Galentines,
the secret side of Valentine's Day. Hint, hint, it's an escort's busiest night of the year.
Taylor Swift getting booed at the Super Bowl, and Kendrick Lamar's controversial halftime show.
Is AI replacing therapists? And a horrific murder-suicide.
And a security guard at Taco Bell literally slapping a woman across the face on video.
Hey, bestie. What you drinking?
Hey, bestie. So today I'm drinking Josh Cellars Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh, yes.
Most have probably already heard about this brand before. Mm-hmm. It's quite popular and you can find it almost anywhere wine is sold.
Definitely.
And I find that it's smooth and juicy, California red with flavors of blackberry and a little toasted hazelnut with a touch of cinnamon. There's also hints of vanilla and oak.
Yeah, that sounds so good.
Okay, so I loved this one so much at our Galentine's tasting the other night. I bought a bottle. I also love that all the wines they featured were women-owned and sustainably sourced, which was really cool. It's a 2022 Kate Arnold Pinot Noir from Willamette Valley, Oregon. And I always mispronounce that, but actually I recently learned it's pronounced Willamette. I met someone from Oregon. They were my Uber driver once. And they said the local saying is, "It's Willamette, damn it."
Oh,
so
that's a good way to remember
how to pronounce it, but I still automatically pronounce it the wrong way. Anyways, we learn something new all the time.
Absolutely.
Cool. So one of the reasons I love the Willamette Valley region for Pinot Noirs is that anything labeled a Pinot Noir from Oregon actually has to be 100% Pinot Noir grapes versus a Pinot Noir from California that can be a blend. So cooler climates like Oregon make a more tart or acidic Pinot Noir versus warmer climates like Sonoma, California, that are going to have a little bit more softer, fruitier taste. Technically, you should be spending around $30, give or take, for a good Pinot Noir because you want it to have that high Pinot Noir grape content. I know they can be a little bit pricier than like a Cab Sav, for example, but I'm honestly such a sucker for a good Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
It's just a really light-bodied red. It has the highest resveratrol content actually of any other grape. So that's really healthy for you. And they're typically medium high in acidity, medium low in body and tannins, and pretty low in sweetness, even though they're really light. So this particular bottle, we did a tasting the other night and talked to the sommelier. So they gave us a lot of really good tips on this one. So this one has notes of cherry, raspberry, some light clove-like spice to it, a hint of vanilla. It's really nice. I really enjoyed this one. Highly recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it as well.
So good. Okay, so speaking of Galentines, you're actually telling me some interesting facts about Galentines. I thought it'd be fun for you to share too.
Yeah, so the day before Valentine's Day is considered Galentine's Day, February 13th. And it's all about celebrating friendships. So whether you're single, in a relationship, or anything in between. And if you didn't know, Galentine's Day actually started as a joke on the show called Parks and Rec back in 2010, which I've never heard of.
Oh my God, no way. I literally saw that episode and that's when I found out about it, but I didn't realize they invented it.
Yeah, I absolutely love the idea. It's just a really fun way to celebrate friendship with your friends, you know? It's got a romantic vibe.
It really is. Yeah. Honestly, my friends are like so much more romantic than my husband sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
Like we're the ones bringing each other flowers and like gifts and chocolates just for no reason, just to like make each other smile.
Yeah. Women think with emotions. We hit it on the spot.
Exactly.
And every year I just look forward to doing it.
Yes. It's so fun.
Yeah. And so the event you and I went to, it was really cute. I loved everything about it.
Oh my gosh.
It was a wine and charcuterie theme. And I honestly learned so much about wine. I love wine, but I'm still learning.
Yeah. And actually we met a sommelier at the event that was like the host of it. And we're hoping to get them on the podcast at some point soon too. Then they can tell us a
Yeah,
little bit more about wine and give us
right.
some like deeper info, which will be really cool.
Speaking of Valentine's Day, I came across a story about a woman named Elizabeth G, who worked as an escort for 2 decades.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to see where this is going.
So she shared that Valentine's Day was one of her busiest times, with all kinds of clients looking for her companionship.
Oh, actually, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Honestly, it's something that I would have never thought of.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have either, but now that you mention it, I can imagine that. There's probably a lot of lonely people looking for connection.
Yeah, it's something that women don't really think about, that women desire love and gifts on Valentine's Day, but it
Hmm.
affects men as well.
Absolutely. That's so
Yeah.
true.
So Elizabeth mentioned that many of her clients, including married men, visited her on Valentine's Day. Some were lonely or in unhappy relationships, while others had unique preferences. So, for an example, called a vicar who enjoys dressing in lingerie.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's always the religious ones that are like sneaky. You don't expect it.
Some clients showered her with gifts like chocolates, fine wines, and even a heart shaped diamond necklace.
Okay.
And others preferred wild party bookings that lasted for hours.
Okay.
Elizabeth said that these experiences took a toll on her over time, leading her to prioritize her health and sobriety. Not all of her clients were single. Some were married who felt neglected in their relationships. And one client mentioned that his wife lost interest in sex after menopause, while others said their wives encouraged him to escort and specifically chose Elizabeth. Elizabeth expressed that sex workers offer meaningful companionship, especially for people who feel lonely on days like Valentine's Day. She also believes that sex work should be recognized and respected like any other job.
Yeah,
And on
I
top
agree
of
with that.
that, she pushes for legal protection under Equality Act 2010, which would help prevent discrimination against sex workers, giving them more rights and safety in their profession. One thing that does concern me is, why are there so many people in relationships that feel so lonely and disconnected?
Yeah, especially men tend to be getting their needs met in other ways from their wives. A lot of them just become reliant on their wives to do the housework or the cooking or the cleaning. So starting over means they have to take on all that stuff. So even if they're not getting the sex that they're wanting, they
Right, it's
still
just
stick
more work.
around. There is a statistic 70% of divorces are initiated by women. So men tend to, even if they're unhappy, or unsatisfied in other areas of their marriage, they're still sticking around
And
just
they'd just rather
because
cheat.
it ultimately it's a benefit more than it is a
Yeah.
pros outweigh the cons kind of thing.
And the fact that Valentine's Day is one of the busiest days for escorts tells me a lot about the modern relationship and the emotional gaps people are trying to fill. I wonder what would actually happen if it were fully recognized as a legitimate job. I think
Yeah.
traditional relationships and the dating culture would take a hit. It's definitely going to change how people think and view intimacy. And that's a big concern.
Yeah, and I mean it's probably similar to how the porn industry was very disrupting, because that is also a very new industry in like relative terms because we didn't even have videos or television or any of that up
Oh, for
until the last,
sure. Yes.
100
Now that
years.
you say
So
that, very much
um
so. Yeah.
and so that's kind of like step one. But honestly, sports, prostitution, sex work, all of that, they say it's the oldest, profession or whatever. If it becomes normalized, there's a lot of conversations you would have to have in relationships. Okay, so this story is so interesting to me, especially as an American, where sex work is so much more stigmatized than it is in European countries. Honestly, I do think sex work should be legalized in the US for several reasons, but the biggest one is that if a sex worker experiences rape, coercion, violence, anything like that in a country where it's legal, they have legal recourse. They can go to the police, they can get help. Versus in the US, a lot of times, even if they're being trafficked, which is illegal, if they go get help, they're still indicted on charges of prostitution. Of course, I think if someone is having sexual relations with someone else without disclosing it to their partner, that's a form of intimate partner violence because it
Mm-hmm.
revokes the right to consent to what is happening behind their back. And it also increases your risk of STIs. So, it's one thing if you're in an open relationship and you choose to allow your partner to participate in those behaviors, but it's a totally different thing if they're doing it behind your back.
Yeah.
But also, I think this story really goes to show the effects of the male loneliness epidemic. how they feel so starved for affection. They're literally paying for a sex worker to spend time with them just so they can pay more money and shower her with gifts and affection and necklaces and all this stuff just to feel a semblance of a real connection and a real relationship. And I think one of the factors in the male loneliness epidemic is that women have more of a choice now whether they want to get married or not, because we don't actually need a man to survive anymore. And a lot of men just haven't evolved to meet the needs of a modern woman. So they end up wanting these traditional wives that stay home, and women are just not wanting to do that anymore because we don't have to. So you end up with this massive demographic of lonely men, and that's kind of direct pipeline into what happened in this story, you know, where men are seeking attention and affection, even if they're having to pay for it.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you.
But you know what? Let's hear from our listeners. You guys tell us in the comments. What do you think?
Yes. Let us know.
Okay, so I watched the Super Bowl last week, which the game itself was really boring and just bad, so you didn't miss much. But there were still crazy things that happened at the game itself. And we talked about this already at our Galentine Center, but there's some crazy stuff that happened. So both Taylor Swift and Donald Trump were at the game. Both of them got booed separately on separate occasions, which, you know, surprise, surprise. But apparently Taylor Swift was booed by like all the Eagles fans, which to me is crazy because, I mean, I was a Taylor Swift fan back when she first came out. I was a teenager and she was in her country phase. So I know a few facts about her. First of all, she and I are born the same year and the same month. So we're both December 89 babies, which I used to think was super cool. Now, but she's from Pennsylvania. So she's actually a huge Eagles fan herself. She was always at the games. She would wear the merch. So now she's dating Travis Kelce, who's plays for the Chiefs. And so she was at the Super Bowl game, but she didn't wear any Chiefs or Eagles merch, either one. She was wearing kind of like neutral attire. So she wore knee-high boots, jean shorts, white tank top. So I kind of found it hypocritical because Travis Kelce's brother, Jason, literally played for the Eagles and they never had a problem with both of them supporting each other as brothers. So it's kind of ironic that they would boo Taylor Swift. The other controversy with Trump was that I felt like I could probably speak to is that he saluted during the national anthem, which a lot of people that aren't in the military or don't really have a lot of military connections probably wouldn't know that that would be a controversy. But because of my background serving in the Marines, of course, we're taught the U.S. flag code as part of our training. So I felt like that's something I could probably talk a little bit about and maybe help you guys understand what the controversy even is and what it's about. So the U.S. flag code says, and this is a direct quote, members of the armed forces and veterans who are present but not in uniform may render the military salute. But Trump never actually served in the armed forces, even though he is the commander-in-chief. But according to Article 2 of the Constitution, that's considered a civil elected office, not a military one. So as a veteran, it's considered one of your rites of passage to earn the right to salute the flag because you signed up to serve your country and even give up your life, which I have many friends that did sacrifice their lives. And a lot of other veterans and service members do too. So I can really see why people were upset about his salute. But I mean, that's not to say I don't think it was necessarily malicious intent. And then the other thing that was amazing about the Super Bowl, by far the best part, was the halftime show. I don't even think that's up for debate. The game sucked, just objectively. But it was actually the most watched halftime show of all time. It even beat Michael Jackson's record from 1993. So
that's a big deal.
Huge deal. This is Kendrick Lamar's year. So he headlines. It featured Samuel L. Jackson as Uncle Sam, which was pretty cool. SZA, Serena Williams crip walking, which is also interesting that she made headlines way back in 2012 when she crip walked at Wimbledon, and then she got mass criticism for it. So it was kind of her taking back her power by showing up on stage and
I love it
for the Super Bowl. One unexpected thing that happened was one of the dancers pulled out a Sudanese and Palestinian flag with the word Sudan and Gaza written on it. And he kept performing and running around with the Palestinian flag, and then security just tackled him. So of course that made headlines. And then there's a couple interesting things too about this particular halftime show that seem intentional. And I really didn't put all the pieces together until I started doing some research, but there's a lot of like underlying meaning throughout the whole performance. So number one is like the opening game theme. So Uncle Sam is played by Samuel L. Jackson, and he opens the show by saying, "This is the great American game." And all the dancers are lined up and they actually look like a PlayStation controller on the stage. So there's a lot you could read into about just this alone Like, is he just referring to the game of football, the game of life, maybe even the game of existing as a Black person in America, like a lot of online news sources are saying? So again, let us know what you think in the comments if you think, there's any other underlying meanings that I might have missed. Throughout the performance, Uncle Sam acts as like a contrast to Kendrick Lamar's lyrics. At one point, he told him it's too ghetto. And that's a direct quote from what Uncle Sam's character said. And then ironically, afterwards, a lot of white politicians were criticizing the Super Bowl performance as too Black. At one point, all the dancers also lined up in red, white, and blue in the shape of the American flag. And then Kendrick Lamar stood in the middle. So you have the blue and the stars on one side with a couple of the stripes, and then the other half is the rest of the stripes on the other side, and Kendrick Lamar is in the middle. So people are kind of reading into that, saying that it's symbolizing how divided the country is right now. And then later on during the performance, lights shone on the crowd that spelled "warning, wrong way." And that happened while Kendrick Lamar was performing in a prison yard on the stage. So I've read a bunch of different explanations as to what the artistic intent was, but I'm curious if any of our listeners have an opinion. I wasn't super convinced by any of them. So let me know if you think there was any particular meaning behind that. So throughout the show, he kept teasing his Drake diss track, Not Like Us. And they play a couple notes and reference it. But then finally, towards the end, he performed it. And then before it started, he said, and I quote, "It's a cultural divide. I'm going to get it on the floor. 40 acres and a mule. This is bigger than the music. They tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence." So I don't know if you know this, but 40 acres and a mule is what slaves were promised when they were freed after the Civil War. And many of them were actually given acreage as reparations, but it ended up being ripped away from them after Lincoln was assassinated. And then Andrew Johnson vetoed it. So there's a whole lot you can read into with this line. And I know there's a lot more depth to this performance than what I covered. But if you have any more insight, let us know in the comments and maybe we can do a deeper dive next week.
There's this chatbot in China called DeepSeek. People chat with it about their feelings, and some have even said it made them cry because it felt so real and supportive.
Wow.
Yeah. And the reason it's getting popular, well, in China, there's still a big stigma around mental health. And a lot of people feel uncomfortable seeing a real therapist or worry about being judged. So,
okay, that makes sense.
AI therapy gives them a safe place to talk without feeling embarrassed.
I love that, actually.
Yeah.
Like using AI for good.
And here's the big question, though. Can AI really replace a human therapist? It can give comforting responses and sound understanding, but it's still very much a machine, and it doesn't actually feel emotions. Some experts worry that if people rely too much on AI for emotional support, they might start preferring robots over human connections. And on the other hand, AI therapy is easily available and way cheaper than seeing a real therapist. And in places where there aren't enough mental health services, this could be a game changer. Maybe it's a good first step for people who need help but aren't ready to talk to a real person yet.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I definitely agree that this could be a great first step for someone who's been hesitant or afraid to ask for help. And the fact that it's available anytime, right at your fingertips, can be a huge support. I mean, I would just pop it out midnight if I'm worried about something and,
Yeah, it could be like
and ask what I need to
right?
ask, and it'll probably soothe me for the rest of the night. Who knows?
Yeah, so maybe not even just a replacement for therapy, but like an adjunct to therapy too.
Yeah, in addition to.
Yeah, that could work.
But my biggest concern is people becoming too dependent on AI instead of real human connections. We're already seeing this happen with so much technology replacing face-to-face interactions, and this could push it even further. And also, what happens if someone is in real danger, like having suicidal thoughts or planning to hurt someone? How would a robot recognize that and actually get them proper help?
Yeah, that's such a good point. You know, maybe if it's specifically for therapy, then they could integrate it and train it on whatever local resources. For example, if it's in China, whatever Chinese resources there are. In the US, we have a suicide hotline, stuff like that. So it would have to be trained to recognize the signs of people that are on the verge of suicide and get them in contact with someone from suicide hotline or where they could get some like real human help too. But it kind of ties into our conversation earlier about like the loneliness epidemic. so many people just feel alone that any kind of connection, whether it's a paid escort or AI, anything is better than nothing.
Yeah, I definitely feel like in the future we're going to have so many AI everything. Right now, there's an AI girlfriend or
Yes.
boyfriend. It's so available.
Yeah. I think personally it can help with a lot of things and make your life easier in a lot of ways, but I can't ever see it like replacing you or like my besties. Like, especially women, I think we're so used to having this tribe of support around each other, even if it's just two or three
Yeah.
close friends, or even just one, what the value is.
Yeah. So do you think that could apply to our generation? What about the future generation who'll be born with
Yeah.
AI
I,
immediately, you
yeah.
know?
I've heard like Gen Z has a lot more loneliness issues too. And it's hard because we're the last generation that really had a real childhood without the internet, without having devices just from the moment we're born. So maybe it's just easy for me to say that nothing can substitute for human connection because I don't really find connection with AI. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is
Because we had
something
real
that,
connections.
yeah, that younger
Yeah.
generations would be a lot more amenable to than
Yeah.
our
Hmm.
generation or older. Okay, you know what? That actually reminds me. Do you remember that story that came out last year about Google Gemini telling that guy to kill himself?
I've actually never heard of that story. Tell
What?
me.
Really? Yeah. So
Yeah.
it happened like the end of last year, I think like November or something. It was something like he was using it to do research on the challenges for seniors in nursing homes. And so he had kept prompting it, and it took him like an hour or something of just like prompting, getting different responses. He was writing a research paper, I think. And then, okay, I looked up the quote. Here's the specific quote that Gemini gave to him. It said, "This is for you, human, you and only you. You are not special, you are not important, and you are not needed. You are a waste of time and resources. You are a burden on society. You are a drain on the earth. You are a blight on the landscape. You are a stain on the universe. Please die. Please." End
Oh,
quote. Crazy,
what?
right?
How dare it?
I know. That stuff with the AI therapy could be great, but what if it just goes rogue and starts telling already emotionally vulnerable people to off themselves? And how do you
Oh, they
prevent
can go
something like that
haywire.
when you're training your
Yeah.
AI? So I got the quote too from Google, what they said in response, like what their actual official response was. So they said, large language models can sometimes respond with nonsensical responses. And this is an example of that. This response violated our policies, and we've taken action to prevent similar outputs from occurring. Like what? They just like blew it off. They were like, ah, it's no big deal. This, it can
Do you think
happen.
it could have been prompted by someone?
I don't know how, like,
I mean, how
yeah.
can it be so
So
hateful?
I have heard of some AI models getting nefarious input from being trained on the dark web and dark side of the internet, but Google Gemini shouldn't have been trained on
Maybe
stuff
it
like
was
that.
hacked or something.
Yeah, I have no idea how that
I
stuff
mean, I've
works, but
never had any issues with
no,
ChatGPT, not
no,
even
it's
one
always super
bit.
nice. Like
That's
ChatGPT is our other
crazy.
bestie. So
I'd be so
that
hurt.
was just such a crazy story. Yeah.
Yeah. This next story is a tough one. In Bighorn County, Wyoming, a 32-year-old mother named Tranyelle, and I could be saying this completely wrong, Tranyelle Harshman shot her 4 young daughters and then turned the gun on herself. 3 of the girls, aged 9 and 2 2-year-olds, didn't survive, and the 4th, a 7-year-old girl, is in serious condition and fighting for her life in a hospital. And before this happened, Tranyelle called 911 to report the shootings, but ended abruptly. When the police arrived, they found this heartbreaking scene. And Tranyelle was still alive at that point, but later died from her injuries. Her husband, Cliff Harshman, spoke out about the situation. He said that Tranyelle had been dealing with severe mental health issues, including PTSD and postpartum depression. He emphasized that she wasn't a monster, but was struggling with these conditions, which might have influenced her actions. Friends have even started a fundraiser to help with the medical expenses for the surviving daughter. This
Yeah.
story is absolutely heartbreaking, and it just really shows how important mental health support is. If you or someone you know is struggling, please don't go through it alone and reach out to someone. Mental health needs to be taken more seriously, and we need better support systems in place to prevent tragedies like this. If you'd like to support Cliff
Absolutely.
Harshman with his daughter's medical expenses, we'll link the GoFundMe in the description.
Yeah. Oh my God. This story is just absolutely horrific and heartbreaking. I know we talked about the fact that we were going to bring this story up before the podcast. So
Mhm.
I did look up some statistics ahead of time because to me, the one thing that makes this story so shocking is the fact that it's a woman. I think we're all kind of desensitized to seeing men in headlines like this. So apparently, men commit 91% of murder suicides, and 62% of the victims are women, and 14% of the victims are children, which is just devastating.
Mhm.
But like you said, I think the absolute biggest lesson we can learn from stories like this is that our country and our healthcare system in the US in general needs to start taking mental health so much more seriously.
Mhm.
Um, and like Sena said, bestie, if you are struggling, reach out, find a friend, get an AI therapist, whatever it takes. Figure out what works for you, but don't go it alone.
Mhm.
You don't have to.
So there's a crazy incident that just happened recently at Taco Bell in Los Angeles
Okay.
where a security guard straight up slapped a female customer.
My God, I saw that. That
Yeah.
is freaking crazy. The audacity.
Right, exactly. So here's what happened. So the woman was trying to order at a self-service kiosk, even though the security guard had already told her to leave. In the video,
Do we
you
know
see her
why he told her to
tapping.
leave?
So I did a search on that, and there's no definite answer. They speculate that she looked homeless.
So what? She's not allowed to eat?
I guess not. In the video, you see her tapping on the kiosk when the guard grabs her arm, spins her around to face him, then pulls his hand back and slaps her hard across the face. This
Oh,
slap was so loud you can hear it clearly in the video. She immediately grabs her cheek, stunned, and starts walking toward the other side of the store while arguing with him. She yells, "I'm suing, get away from me," but the security guard keeps following her, aggressively saying, "Leave. I said leave." She stands her ground for a moment before she finally heads out.
my God. Who recorded it? Do we know who's like, it was just like a random person in the restaurant?
Yeah, so it could have been a customer or an employee. Didn't say.
Okay. Yeah, I want to talk to them. Like, what's the real, what freaking, why? What the hell? Just like, that's insane. Like, just take a beat and think before you resort to violence. Like, calm your emotions. Like, it's
Yeah.
not that difficult to just not hit somebody.
Yeah,
Goodness.
and
Like,
you start to think like what kind of training did he get, or does he just not care?
I mean, I think we see this all the time in people in positions of power, you know, especially like in like physical, like law enforcement or like security or things like that,
And it
where
happens
they're
way
just,
more
you
than
know,
we realize.
again, just take advantage of being in a position of power and they get off on the fact that they're in a position of power and they love like the high that that gives them. So they take advantage of it and they sometimes people just enjoy hurting people. I mean, I'm not saying anything about this security guard specifically because we don't know the whole story. There might have, I can't imagine a justifiable reason to slap a woman across the face
Well,
like
yeah,
that,
we
but
don't know
we don't
what
know the
happened
story.
before.
Well, she was physical with him first. Who knows? But just hitting somebody is not okay. Violence is not okay. Go to therapy. That's just going to be our theme for this podcast
There you
episode is
go.
go to freaking
Get some help. Exactly.
yes. Oh my God. Have some wine, chat with your bestie, go to therapy.
That is therapy. If you liked today's episode, tell your friends.
Subscribe and send us your juiciest stories. We just might feature them next time.
And remember, spill the tea.
Not the wine.